The World Championship match begins on the 26th of November in Dubai. World Champion Magnus Carlsen faces the challenger Jan Nepomniachtchi. Find it really hard to predict what's going to happen, but I'm going through a lot of their previous games to try and recognise some patterns. And in the last video, I showed you a fascinating game where Carlsen managed to create imbalance and finally tipped Nepo over. Do check out that video. You'll find it down there in the description. This game is a lot calmer, played in the Tata Steel India tournament in Kolkata at the end of 2019, November 2019. Before I show you the game, let me just say I'm very grateful to all my patrons who support the channel on patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. Do check it out if you want to become a patron of the channel. You get rewards like videos in advance without adverts. There's the Monday Morning Mate. There are extra videos depending on how much you support the channel by each month. So do check it out. Do become a patron of the channel. Right, on with this game. Carlsen with the white pieces. Interesting to see Nepo looks like he wants to go in for the Najdorf variation with d6. You know, in some ways he has quite a limited repertoire, and that can be risky. I have a funny feeling we might see a more solid Nepo in the match. But anyway, Bishop b5 check by Carlsen. So he doesn't go in for the Najdorf. Bishop b5 check, you keep more control in the position. And Nepo indicates he wants an uncompromising struggle, plays knight d7. You can play bishop d7, which is much quieter. But knight d7, well, you know, you try and grab the two bishops, for example. d4 from Carlsen. Many ways to play this, but this is a pretty straightforward way. a6, now you can just take, but Carlsen dips back with the bishop. And the aim of this is to perhaps go for a Maroczy bind with c4. So, I mean, black can play, for example, e6 here, but then c4, knight c3. Possible to play like that for black. It just depends what kind of structure you like. But Nepo, well, he sticks to his Najdorf instincts and plays the pawn to e5. So this typical Najdorf pawn structure. And this is not bad for black. And knight c5. You can see the queen is slightly awkwardly placed on e3. Knight d2. Okay, what's this about? Why defend the e-pawn like this? You know, why not just knight c3? Well, if knight c3, then I think that is a pretty substandard position for white with the queen on e3. It just gets in the way of this bishop. But the point is, and it blocks the c-pawn, the point is that after knight fd2, that white wants to play c4 and knight c3. So in that way, it'd still go for a kind of Maroczy bind. Now, there are lots of ways that black can play this. I mean, you can allow this and just play like this. I mean, this is not a bad position for black because I think this knight is slightly oddly placed on d2. And in practice, that's done okay for black. But Nepo, again, you know, he's uncompromising. He plays b5, gaining space on the queen side, this typical Najdorf move, of course neglecting his kingside development for the time being. And Carlsen plays c4, opening up the position, looks very logical indeed. And Nepo takes this. There's an interesting way for black to play here, and that's just to give up a pawn, actually. And because white's development on the queen side is rather hampered, you can see this, the knight gets in the way of the bishop. Actually, black has very nice compensation there. If f3, that'll weaken the king. You know, then black can consider d5. You know, this is kind of classic Najdorf Sicilian breakout position. But Nepo just took on c4. Remember, this is a rapid play game, so there's not that much time to kind of assimilate new positions. Knight c3 from Carlsen. Bishop takes c4. So the bishop reaches an excellent diagonal here. Bishop e7. So Nepo wants to castle. And now Carlsen starts to take the initiative on the queen side. b4. Hits the knight, which comes back to e6. That's It's a nice square. Looks potentially at these outposts. But you can see that Carlsen is starting to take some control here. Rook c8 looks nice because it hits these pieces that don't have support of a pawn. But after knight a5, well, I mean, this looks like white is starting to get real control in the position. Somehow this pawn break with b5 has kind of rebounded, and Carlsen has managed to get control with these pieces. So the bishop is hit, queen d7, and queen d3, nice little move, just putting more pressure here. Castles. Now, of course, one would like to take here and take here, but that's not going to work in this case because if rook takes, if queen takes, then queen takes here. But there's no need to plunge in if the tactics aren't working. Just clean development. Bishop e3 covers the d4 square, and white's setup just looks fantastic already. Everything is protected, everything is hanging together, and there's control over d5. a6 looks weak. It's already a very, very difficult position for black. Bishop d8. I think the problem is in rapid play, if you get a poor position out of the opening, then you have to invest time to try and dig yourself out of it. In rapid play, you don't have that much time to find something interesting. Bishop d8 hits the knight. Knight takes, gets rid of that important light square bishop. So now this piece is a monster because it doesn't have an opponent. Once again, the tactics aren't working for Carlsen. Bishop takes a6, rook c3, but there's no need to go in for tactics here. Knight d5, because white just controls these light squares. Now, if knight takes, then here, and well, white just has a huge positional advantage. Maybe that's the way for black to play, but it's not an easy position at all with this rook coming over to hit the queen. The a-pawn waiting to roll down the board, and that bishop on d5, absolutely supreme. Nepo brings the knight back to c7, trying to fight for control over d5. Knight takes, bishop takes. Now, rook b1. There's no need to sort of go in for tactical stuff with queen here. Well, I think it would be quite tricky actually, because that pawn could be taken. But Carlsen just needs to keep control here, and he has that. These pieces are fantastic, all working together beautifully. And this is basically your nightmare Sicilian position for black. Rook d1 keeps control, just controlling the d5 square. h6 gives the king a flight square, but also perhaps looks to play bishop g5 to exchange off that bishop. f3, that means the bishop can just duck back here, and the e-pawn is protected. Queen c6. Now an excellent move, queen b3. So you can see that Carlsen has control over these light squares, and yeah, it's just complete domination. And that is a miserable move to have to make, bringing the queen back to defend the f7 pawn. a4, I mean, this is just absolute clockwork now, supported by the bishops. Carlsen creates a passed b pawn and rolls down the board. I mean, we're only on move 28, and it feels almost like an end game actually, where Carlsen has created this passed pawn and it looks like it's rolling home. And there's not a lot that Nepo can do here, because b7 isn't a stable blockade. Obviously the bishop can come to d5. So the pawn is going all the way to b7. And already I think we can say that black's position is utterly lost. So Nepo gives up a pawn to get rid of one of the bishops and perhaps hopes to use the dart squares, but it is very much in vain. That locks in the pawn on b7. Black is completely lost. Now it is that famed matter of technique. Let's see how Carlsen does it. Well, first of all, trading off that sort of active rook is good news. So that just leaves this rook really passive. Now, I really like what Carlsen does next. Basically, in this kind of position where you have complete control, you don't need to rush it. You know, you could consider playing moves like this and get the rook in, but you've got to watch out for a little bit of counterplay with c4, and also exchanging rooks on b8 might not really achieve much. You know, black can maintain the blockade on the dark square. So what does Carlsen do? Well, he keeps control for the moment. He knows the rook can't move, so black is completely tied down. The queen is tied down defending here. Okay, let's just make sure the king is completely secure. Let's put it on a light square. That avoids any tactics. Very nice. And can start rolling this kingside pawn majority. Beautiful. Bishop f6, king g2. This is called the squeeze. Black can't do anything, so why not? Okay, so the king is secure now. Let's move in with the queen. Bishop e5, so Nepo's protecting this one. Queen c6, the queen is crawling in. So there could be potential to check here. King h7, therefore. f4. Let's squeeze black. So the bishop, you know, if it went back here, it's not a very stable square. So Nepo puts it so it's protected. But of course that means there is a problem with b8. Queen d6. And now, well, bishop f7 is just winning, but Carlsen plays check, and I like what he does next. He doesn't bother taking here. He plays king h3, and this is just kind of milking it. You know, he's saying to Nepo, you can't do anything at all. I'm just going to put my king on an even safer square, and you know, you can do nothing, absolutely nothing. So for example, if f6, if you want to try and save that pawn, then check. Here, bishop here, check. Rook b6, when that's taken, bishop f5, and well, that's going to be the end of the story once the king opens up. Check, and let's say here and here, and I don't think there's a defense to check and mate. Or if I mess... No, I've messed that up. I've messed that up. That's clever. Okay, I'll come back here. Oh, this is good fun. Okay, let me take here instead. And this time I'll play that one. It's not too late to mess up a game of chess. Yeah, that'll do. And that's going to be a queen on the next turn. Well, that was sloppy of me. I'm sure Carlsen wouldn't have messed it up like that. Yeah, well, I got there after 2 seconds thought. So yeah, basically in this position, queen a6 played, and Carlsen didn't even bother taking a pawn. He just played e5 instead. And yeah, Nepo still can't do anything here. So bishop e4 could come, and you know, that would induce g6, and then there's you can take on f7. Well, it's absolutely horrible. So here, Nepomniachtchi resigned the game. So what a contrast between this squeeze, this positional squeeze, and the chaos and the imbalance of the last game that we saw where Carlsen won. But there's one thing I want to note here, and that is Nepo's slight stubbornness in sticking to certain systems that he has. Like here, you know, going for this Najdorf structure, but being really outplayed in it. So will we see Nepo sticking to his favourite openings in the World Championship match? Your guess is as good as mine. I have a feeling, however, that he's going to broaden out his openings, and I think we will see more of e4, e5 in the World Championship match. But if we do get some Najdorfs, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. Although I would guess that Carlsen would stick to bishop b5s, but who knows. Right, more in this series coming soon. I hope you're enjoying it. And once again, do check out patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. Thanks for watching.